Hey there, this is Tom with the Diogenes Lamp podcast. I appreciate you listening in, and most importantly, I hope you enjoy what you hear. Before we start with today's episode, I'm going to ask you for a small favor. Believe it or not, history podcasts, especially in their early stages, tend not to be cash cows. Shocker, I know. I too was blindsided by this news. Now, I didn't go into this for the money. I think that much is obvious. But unfortunately, books, research materials, and equipment aren't free. If you are interested in supporting this project, please go to patreon.com/Diogenes Lamp Podcast and become a member. When you become a member, you'll get access to bonus episodes, our Discord chat, and anything else we'll offer in the future as this community grows. If you don't want to support me financially or can't, that's fine too. I get it. But please, make sure to hit the like button on any episode you enjoyed listening to and subscribe to the podcast on your preferred podcast listening medium. Your support is appreciated. Thanks for listening, and now on to the show. Glory cannot be bought with money. Socrates. Good evening and welcome to the Greeks of War segment of the Diogenes Lamp podcast, episode 12. Mailed fist is undeliverable. I have a good friend of the pod here with us today, Jessica. Hello, welcome to our outfit. Hope you enjoy what you hear. Happy to have you here today.
Well, thank you so much for the welcome. I promise not to chase you through the agora and pelt you with questions like Socrates. What an interesting welcome.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, right? I was just reading. I'm working on an episode for the podcast on Diogenes, so people have an idea why I named the thing Diogenes Lamp. Which, if you know a little bit about Diogenes, right? You walk around broad daylight with a lamp. People would say, "What the fuck are you doing with the lamp, you moron? It's daylight." And he would say, "I'm searching for a man, or the truth," he would say, or honest man, something like that, depending on the translation, right? But it's funny you brought that up because philosophers, like you're saying back then, exactly like you said, were known for doing that, like chasing people around the agora and like begging them to talk with them. You know what I mean? So
I've been called the Texan Socrates, so, here we are. That's perfect. That's what we're doing.
So like a very large philosopher then, because everything's bigger in Texas. I guess.
Or a very small one.
Or a very small one. One of the two.
One of the two, so, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. So let's get into it. Where we left off last, the Greeks continued to punish the overconfident and underprepared Italians and had penetrated into the region of northern Epirus in southern Albania. But their glorious advance was derailed by lack of supplies, Italian reinforcements, and the brutal winter in Albania, and of course the unexpected death of dictator Ioannis Metaxas, right? And this is obviously a huge blow. Metaxas has been a central part of our story, literally for probably the bulk of our podcast up to this point. And like whatever opinions you may have about Metaxas or how you feel about his passing, he was the leader, the chief leader. A dictator.
One could say he was literally holding the line, as it were.
You could. But a ching, there you go. Exactly. And, like, dictator, whatever you want to call him, and this is in no way, like, defense. I hope, like, people realize at this point. Like, when I first introduced Metaxas, we had an episode on him, I said, you can either say he is a dictator and he can rest in piss like the rest of dead dictators in the world, which I think is a valid take because I consider myself anti-authoritarian, and I think we should all be. If you read enough history, you see it's important to be anti-authoritarian, right? But he was surprisingly competent for as far as dictators go, which is rare.
Not to be... This is something I've come across and something I've spoken on recently, actually. Hey, guys, I'm an historian, a real one.
Which is why I
not
got
a social
Jessica here.
media one.
Which is why I got Jessica here, by the way. I scouted her out. I said, I think this would be a good addition for us. Please, speak freely, Jessica.
Yeah, you totally did. You played historian Moneyball. It was a great thing to watch. It was just like recruitment magic.
There we go.
So what it's really important, and again, I am fully anti-authoritarian, but it's also important to remember, one, this is wartime, and not just any war. Crazy wartime. Something, again, we have never seen in all of human history. And two, it's really important, and I'm going to try to say this as plainly as I can say this, not to take our current, how do I want to say this? Environment and our current principles and morals and try to apply them to the time that we are talking about, and specifically what is required in this period. It's pretty dire in Greece. Things are rough. And the Axis powers are coming. So it's an extraordinary time. It's an extraordinary place. Nobody's a fan of totalitarianism, but the guy's done a good job with defense thus far. We will say that and leave it there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And also, like you've listened to our segment thus far, the political chaos that was leading up to him taking over, at a certain point.
Yeah.
At a certain point, what's the republic if you have, something like 20 coups in 10 years or whatever the case, right? It's not,
yes. Sorry. I just took a drink like a few minutes ago. I've been silently trying not to choke on it this entire time.
Choke away.
You've had me laughing.
No, but no, you're 100% right. Like, that's something that I think people do a lot. And, it's just different. It was the 1930s and 40s in Greece. And again, so anyways, moving on from that, the news of his passing was as demoralizing and shocking as you can imagine, especially for the troops on the front line. And for many over there on the front line, it was thought to be a rumor at first, but slowly, it was confirmed to be true, which is probably the last thing you want to hear while freezing to death and being eaten by lice in southern Albania in early February. But time goes on. Italians keep coming, bombs keep dropping, right? So, on the same day as his passing, the king appoints former central banker Alexander Gorizis as prime minister, to the consternation of some who would have preferred either someone like in the military or even the archbishop. But Gorizis had to do for the time being. After all, there's not a lot of time for debate, right? There's war, big war going on. So, while events on the Albanian front remained mostly static due to the weather, on the diplomatic front, things were anything but. And in what felt like an unbelievable act of betrayal, but not the most surprising given the circumstances, Turkey signed a non-aggression pact with Bulgaria. So Greece is like, what the fuck, man? We're not dead yet, we're still fighting. Yeah, it's Turkey. They do this.
It's Turkey. They do this. This
happens. It's a reoccurring thing.
Par for the course, if one will.
Yeah, 100%. And we're gonna see. Trust me, they're gonna make a non-aggression quote unquote friendship treaty with someone else in the near future. So we'll cover that soon enough. But you remember those treaty obligations that Turkey had that was deterring Bulgaria from invading in tandem with Italy way back in October. Those are gone now. And, you might say, like, so what? After all, like you said earlier, right? Metaxas was holding the line, right?
Right.
Holding the line. And literally, again, made an entire line, named it after himself. Well made to equip and repel a Bulgarian invasion. you know. And perhaps, who knows for sure, this alternate history, Greece could have held also Bulgaria coming from another direction, right? Down from Macedonia and up there and from Thrace. So good luck, Bulgaria. Go for it. But, it wasn't really just the Bulgarians that was freaking people out at this point. You know what I mean? It was the real boogeyman on everyone's mind was the growing encroachment of the Germans in the Balkans. I hadn't mentioned it earlier, but in late November, Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia all joined the Axis powers, completely encircling Greece's only steadfast ally in the region, Yugoslavia. And it's funny, like, those are always, I'm a quote unquote amateur historian, but I feel like the smaller Axis partners are always overlooked. You know what I mean? Like, I never really knew until I started studying, but you know what I mean? Like Slovakia, and whatnot, Hungary, Romania.
They very much are, and in that same turn, oftentimes Bulgaria is overlooked in that same turn because everybody's so busy looking to the Germans and German involvement and British involvement, and that growing German involvement comes because of growing British involvement. But Yugoslavia is just as important, and Bulgaria is just as important. I mean, there's a reason it's called the powder keg. Once you get into the Balkans, it tends to set off a whole fun, chain of crazy that everybody gets involved. But it is, and Yugoslavia often gets overlooked in a number of world conflicts and throughout world history into the 20th century. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. That's a whole other thing, I mean, to get into. So I won't get into it now, or else I know you have
We're
a lot.
We're focused on Greece here. I'm not going to sidetrack.
No. It's all right. A little sidetracking I like. It's good. This is why we brought you here, Jessica. So, Yugoslavia at this point, fully encircled. And apart from this encirclement, reports had been streaming in since early January-ish that something like 12 German divisions had arrived in Romania, and that the German military engineers were hastily building bridges across the Danube River in what obviously were preparations to move military troops and equipment across into Bulgaria, right? So it's like, they're not there for vacation, right? Terrible
Can you
time
imagine what a bad day it was to be Mussolini? Imagine how pissy Hitler was. Just like, I've got to go down.
Isn't there a quote by Ciano or someone that's like, I think maybe Badoglio was like, we need to call Hitler. And Ciano was like, I'd rather put a bullet in my head or something like that. I forgot exactly.
Yeah.
I forgot exactly.
Yes, there is something
like that.
along those lines. Something like that. Like, I would just rather, because, Hitler was very much like, we have all of North Africa that could have been concentrated on. And as
12 divisions.
Mussolini was throwing a huge fit because of France and thought, I'm going to take Greece because I'm pouty today.
Right.
During the wet season. At the worst time. Move. As we know, you've covered all this. Real smart move. So imagine what a bad day it was to be Mussolini. That was a lot. You're right. That's a lot of men and a lot of troops for what strategic game? Ooh. Bad day.
Yeah. Not good. And lastly, now that Turkey had proved itself, as a useless ally at this point by doing practically nothing substantial to help Greece in its situation, most hope that anyone had in Turkey in the event of a German push through Bulgaria into Greece, everyone's like, they're not going to help, more than likely. I mean, who knows, but probably not. If they just made a non-aggression pact with Bulgaria, who's an ally of Germany, what are the odds? In sum, the Balkan Pact is gone. No more Balkan Pact, right? So, even so, at the diplomatic level, Turkey still would help out as long as it didn't involve actually fighting anyone or doing anything meaningful. And in late February, a tip from a friendly Turkish military attaché revealed that there were now over 450,000 German troops in Romania, and that they were painting their tanks white to help with camouflage for the snow of northern Greece. So, great. Nice military attaché, though, to say that. So if there were any questions about what the Germans were up to, they were answered when the Germans formally crossed the border into Bulgaria on the 1st of March.
I was going to say, in its own way, it's interesting that the Turks were still willing to help with intelligence. And in its own way, if Greece, with the help of the British, and they certainly were able to use this to a greater advantage later, on an episode that I probably won't be on, but you guys are certainly going to get into it later. But for the moment, it's not particularly helpful, but it definitely will be. Turkish intelligence on this matter is going to be helpful. Yeah. But as of the moment, they could not be less useful.
I know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But you're right.
I mean,
as
just
we're going to get into lately.
Thanks for nothing.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, like later, especially like during the occupation, like Turkey will play a bigger role, like, you know, Greek troops getting in there. And we're going to get into that shortly. But yeah.
Right. But right now, it's just a lot of thanks for nothing, guys.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't say.
Yeah. Pretty much. I think they sent...
Turkey doing...
Oh, I'd have to look it up. I think it's in the book, The Last Ottomans by Kevin Featherstone or whatever. But I think they cite, like, at some point, them sending a box of Turkish delights. Something like that. Like, it's like, from your allies in Turkey. It's like, thanks. It's like...
How very the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe of them.
I know. Yeah, right? Yeah. That guy, I forgot about that. That guy loved Turkish delights, right?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. I do remember that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to find it. And then I'll cite it. I'll cite it in a meme or something, but it's somewhere out there. Anyways, back on the Albanian front, winter was slowly but surely starting to break up, and Mussolini hadn't given up just yet. And what will go down as his final, last-ditch effort to deliver anything even remotely resembling a victory in Albania, I present to you the, here's my Italian accent, Offensiva di Primavera, or Operation Spring. And it was set to spring into action, da-da-ching, on March 9th. Get it? Spring.
Oh, I got it. But
yeah. Ba-da-ching. So, nonetheless, this offensive was going to be big, and Mussolini, being the vainglorious son of a bitch he was, flew over from Rome to watch from afar what was supposed to be like the final Italian victory they had been hoping for since October. So, around 6 a.m. on March 9th, Mussolini took a seat at an observation post on Komaret, some 2,500 feet above sea level, surrounded by other top military brass, including General Cavallero, who I'm sure was sweating bullets because you're sitting next to Mussolini and, everything has gone to shit for months now. It's like your boss. It's like sitting next to your boss at a big, like, business meeting, but it's a giant war. And your boss is Mussolini. So, the new Italian reinforcements, who had no experience fighting the Greeks, were cocky as ever. And the especially dedicated fascists, the fanatics, per se, called the squadristi, had even come up with a little tune to get people in the spirits for what they were sure would be a crushing victory. And so they had their own song, the squadristi. Soon it will fall to us, squadristi of Milan, to surge towards the front, bombs and grenades in hand. And now the war has come, the Duce does insist, the Greeks will get a taste of our mailed fist. Sure, it rhymes. In Italian, it sounds a lot better.
I'm sure it has a much better ring to it. Yes.
Yes, naturally, right? But regardless of how it sounds in Italian, it's not gonna go well for them. Anyways, we'll see that. We'll get into that now. The operation started off at sunrise with a devastating artillery barrage of over 100,000 shells in just a couple of hours. This is, of course, accompanied by Italian air support, as this time around, the weather was on the Italian side, and their fighters and bombers flew unopposed. Skies were clear, right? All of this firepower was focused on two specific points, hills 717 and 731, which were part of a larger defensive line of trebuchet. And just to be clear, there were many other Greek defensive positions that would come under heavy fire and Italian offensive operations as well. But we're going to talk a bit more so on these two hills or heights per se, especially height 731, which like height 731, huge part of Greek military lore and prestige to this day. Like you go on YouTube, you look up Ipsoma F3 height 731. It's huge. It's like, I don't know, Hamburger Hill equivalent for America. I don't know. Iwo Jima. I don't know exactly. It's a big deal though.
Dardanelles.
Maybe.
Are we
Dardanelles?
Thinking like the Dardanelles equivalent?
It's just really heroic.
Gallipoli.
Maybe, yeah. Gallipoli, you could say. Gallipoli, you could say, except the Greeks. I mean, was Gallipoli technically was it technically defeat or a stalemate? It was defeat because they pulled out, I guess. Anyways, like I said,
stalemate. But I'm trying to think in terms of like just topography. I'm trying to visualize what we're.
Oh, it's just a large. So it's like a chain of mountains. It's a chain of mountains in.
So it is
Albania.
Similar to like what we're dealing with. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry,
absolutely.
I'm trying to visualize it in my head. Okay.
No. You got it. Yeah, and it's just a big deal.
I did not look at a map.
No, it's okay. We'll post one.
Map. I'm sorry.
We'll post one on. No, it's okay. We'll post one on the gram. No worries. But like, bottom line,
cool.
Height 731, big fucking deal in Greek military history. You talk to any like Greek history nerds and stuff like that. Well, we're 731, big deal. Anyways, the barrage lasted a few hours, and the men of the Italian Pugli division charged hills 731 and 717. In typical Greek fashion, they were driven off in hand-to-hand combat. And then around noon, the Pugli division took 717, lost it, and then regained it again around noon. By sunset, the Italians would hold on to hill 717. 731, though, still was in Greek hands. So this is already not the victory Mussolini and company were expecting. Greek soldiers were half starved, half frozen, had just had thousands of tons of explosive dumped on and around them, but it wasn't enough. The Greeks were lucky enough to interpret an Italian radio message.
Interestingly enough, even though the Italians are switching out fresh troops, fresh supplies, technically they have more divisions. Greek divisions are larger in this case. I mean, really and truly, though, the Italians are actually playing around with a little poorer equipment. I know that that's crazy to think, but they're actually not playing with as much quality as the Greeks are playing
it's funny.
And that's going to really come into play.
I talk about this a little bit. Historian John Carr actually touches on that. And it's funny you bring that up because I don't know if do you know John Carr? He has a really great book on this. Huge source we use, of course, along with David Brewer.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, like, he talks about that, and it kind of just runs counter to, like the common narrative you hear about the Greco-Italian War, that, the Greeks were outmanned and outgunned, and, like, in a lot of respects, they were. But in some respects, it wasn't that clear. Like, there was Greek equipment that was superior to Italian equipment, right? So, the Greeks were lucky enough to intercept an Italian radio message that said, quote, "It is not possible that the Italian army cannot push back the inferior Greek army." Ha! Oh my.
Oh, that's great. I mean, that just, you can't write that.
I know. It's really funny. It's really funny because it's just so ridiculous. It's like, it's not possible. Clearly it's possible. You guys, it's not even like this is the first week of this is happening either, mind you, right? Like, I don't know why they're so surprised.
Right.
And it was possible primarily because the Greeks were not just like ready to die on those hills. They were commanded to die on those hills. Literally, on March 9th, Lieutenant Colonel Katseas ordered, and quote, hold your positions at all costs. I'm expecting reports either by liaison or by phone for the tactical situation to your left, to your right, and up front. Nobody will abandon his position or move to the rear. We shall all die here.
Very Ataturk of him.
There you go. Yeah. What Ataturk say? If I die here, just step over me. Like, is that what he said at Gallipoli? Right? That's his famous thing or whatever.
Yeah.
Ignore me.
Yeah.
Just step over me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
something.
for sure.
I mean, essentially.
Something along those lines, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I mean, the Greeks were. The morale was fanatic, which I mean, our listeners already know at this point if they've been listening to this segment. So the next week would, in a nutshell, be all of this, all of these Italian defeats and more. And by March 15th, no less than 17 futile attempts had been made at taking Hill 731. 17. So during the battle, Mussolini himself was almost blown to bits by a Greek bomber which just missed the observation post, causing Mussolini, Cavallero, and the other generals and officials to run for a bunker. Just a little closer, and they could have really taken out El Duce. But I'm sorry, I can't resist. It just sounds too similar, By March 22nd, the Italians suffered around 12,000 casualties, with a 12th of that for the Greeks. Mussolini had already left the day before on the 21st, apparently disgusted by what he saw. Great stuff, Mussolini. After the repulsion of the Italians and the complete failure of Operation Primavera, along with Greek reinforcements arriving to the Trebeshin defensive line, Cavallero was smart enough to realize that any success in this theater was impossible, and Italian offensive operations finally stopped on the 25th of March, 1941, almost 5 months to the day when the first Italian divisions crossed into the Greek border. It started off with Italian soldiers. They would be drinking coffee in Ioannina and Athens in a few days, and ended with the French town of Meton posting a sign stating, quote, Greeks, advance no further. This is French territory. Yeah, it's humiliating. I got some jokes for you, okay, Jess? How many gears does an Italian tank have?
How many?
1 forward and 4 in reverse. Ha! It's kind of a good one.
That's a pretty good one.
Yeah.
Heard that.
Here's another good one. What is the shortest book in the world?
What is the shortest book in the world?
The Italian Book of War Heroes, of course. That's kind of mean. I feel bad. I do feel bad for that one. What is the name of Hitler's dog?
I don't know.
You know this one. Come on.
Mussolini,
Benito Mussolini, exactly. That's a good one too, huh?
That is my favorite. That's always been my favorite.
Yeah. Those are great. And I got all those, by the way,
it's Hitler's favorite kicking puppy.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I got all those, by the way. I didn't make those up. I got those, obviously. I got those from Captain Corelli's Mandolin. Great book. Movie I haven't seen in years. I remember it being pretty terrible. Is it good? I don't remember anything about it. It's funny-ish. Penelope Cruz. It's old.
I've not seen that in
a decade plus. I haven't.
Yeah. I was probably a teenager since the last time I saw that, and that was a while ago. For our audience, first off, I have to tell you, I've learned so much because this is a massive part of the war that I just know nothing about. So I am so geared in right now. Yes, way. Very little. Cool. I know very little. So I'm so pumped to be here. I'm learning so much.
Glad to hear. That's what we like to hear here at the Diogenes Land podcast. So that's partly why I wanted to make all this stuff, is just to tell people and educate people the best I could. But by the way, the movie came out in 2001. I only remember the part where the Italians go surrender and the mayor tells them to go F off. And they're like, they want, and which is a true story. They literally would have they accepted a surrender from like the lowest level German on the island. It takes place on the island of Kefalonia. And I mean, in sum, it's about the liquidation of the Acqui division. You know, when the Italians flip sides in 43.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Germans like liquidate an entire division on the island. It's really sad, actually. Anyways, we'll have a bonus episode on Captain Corelli's mandolin here. That is in the works.
Yeah, we're going to have to. I'm going to go watch that tonight now.
Yeah. And the book is awesome, too. The book is really, really great. But we got something in the works. So the Italians and Mussolini specifically, as we were talking about, had become the laughingstock of the world, an embarrassment to the Axis. And, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but for the remainder of the war, they largely play like an auxiliary position.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
At this
From
point,
what I've understood.
Yes, they do, because not only does Hitler very much have to, Germany has to bail them out, but then to add insult to injury, Germany has to further bail them out in North Africa.
Right. Yeah, they start getting their asses kicked there as well. Yeah.
Imagine, right. They get their asses kicked there as well, and that's no fun. But this is absolutely, they never recover from this, and it's just it's utter humiliation for Italy. I mean, they never even got their sea legs. They never got a good start. They never. Right, because this, it really should have been, for a power like Italy, this should have been, regardless of time, place, all the disadvantages, it should have been easy. It was 100%. Not. This was absolutely humiliating.
Yeah, Italy was a major, even today, I'm pretty sure Italy's a G7 member, if not G10.
Mm-hmm.
One of the two. Back then,
G10.
Italy was also, maybe G10, yeah. But Italy was also like a major power. I mean, it really wasn't until this probably that, there were some signs that it took them to take a year to take over Ethiopia. There were some signs, but Greece really like exposed them. There's that book, I don't know if you know, The Hollow Legions. It's a translation by this Italian historian, Mario Cervi. Fitting name.
Yeah. Yeah, Drea, Ethiopia, that was, it did expose a little bit, but man, this was, and to me, this is, I'm not a military historian by any means or stretch of the imagination. Yeah. This is something very new to me, and I'm so glad you've had me on. I've learned so much, but to me, this has always been how I've earmarked this conflict in my mind, as this exists very much in my head as this was the moment that this is the first big served defeat for the Axis.
Yep.
Like, oh Lord, like it was this didn't look good for Germany. This left Germany's back door open. The British were super excited for that fact. This was a big win for the Greeks. This was...
Yeah, it's huge.
Oh,
huge.
It was bad.
And it's a national holiday for Greece. Ohi Day, we call it.
It was...
No day.
It was a big point that served... Greece single-handedly sort of said to everybody, hey, there's hope.
Yeah.
Because we have to remember, the United States isn't in the war. At this point, with the fall of France, Britain's standing pretty much alone. Guys. So this is a moment that says, hey, there's hope. There's a weakness here. This is not as crazy as it looks. So
exactly. And that's the big thing. You have all the quotes. I don't like to quote Churchill a lot because he's problematic, but for the time he was who he is. Again, whatever. He's you know what I'm talking
Churchill
about.
Is who Churchill is.
Exactly.
What are you gonna do? Yeah.
Exactly. Right. But I mean, he did have some really cool quotes. The Greeks, heroes don't fight like Greeks. Greeks fight like heroes. Or am I getting it wrong? Heroes
No,
don't fight
not at
like
all.
Greeks. I think that's what it is. Sorry, guys, I need more coffee. But yeah, you have all these lots of praise heaped on the Greeks. And it is a David Goliath defeat. It is a big deal. Anyways, let's get into the next big question, which is, how could this have happened? Why did it go so wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And why did the Italians suck so much? Like, why? Right? And a lot of these you've already talked on as well, or spoke on. But, there's the more appropriate question is that the more appropriate question isn't that why did the Italians suck per se? It's that why did they fail? I feel like is the more apt approach to this conversation.
Well,
right?
like me, they didn't look at a topographical map before they got into this discussion.
yeah, right.
Let's
absolutely.
start there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly it. Like after the initial invasion was halted at the Kalamas River by Mazower and Samarina, the Greeks were in Albania within like 2 weeks. Right, it was very rapid. The Italian defeats were successive, one after the other, seemingly endless, and like so complete and unquestionable was the Italian lack of martial prowess that the Greeks would come to call them, the Italians, the makaronades, which in Greek means the spaghetti eaters.
Oh, that's not funny. I'm sorry, but it's kind of
it's kind of funny. So like it's funny, it's like stereotypical, but it's just fun. Like I don't know, like the Germans were called, the title of this episode's Krauts to the Rescue. They called Krauts for sauerkraut, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Similar thing. So Italians to the Greeks, they're just a bunch of spaghetti eaters. So they should be eating spaghetti in this logic. They should be eating spaghetti instead of fighting. Naturally. Right. Hey. All jokes aside, though, again, we ask ourselves, like, why were they so terrible? As with most things in life, the answer is complicated. Let's start from the very top, though, the highest we can go to in the Italian military organization and the state itself, Mussolini, who, I've said this before, was an absolute fucking moron. He was an idiot. He was really incompetent. And there's a really well-known Greek saying, the fish rots from the head. And my God, was the head of the Italian state rotten. So, yeah. Do you have anything you want to say?
He was best suited to eating crayons. I mean, like, I don't know what else to tell you. Like, he definitely... Not that anybody should be leading a fascist state, but...
Right.
It does take a certain amount of organization. That guy was particularly ill-suited to it.
Right.
You kind of got to be Johnny on the spot, and he was not. He was not. Oh, God.
Yeah.
I can't overstate that. He was very ill-suited to the position.
100%. 100%. And as brave as the individual Italian soldier was, and like, let's give it to them. We're talking about these battles where like, they're charging up the same hill, like the 10th time after they've lost it. Like, God bless them, dude. I would not go up that hill after the second time. I don't know if I would. I mean, who knows in those circumstances, of course, but Lord of mercy. Brave, fearless for sure, but unfortunately, bravery alone can't overcome terrible leadership.
The fact that they did not have greater desertion numbers speaks to the Italian soldier. Like it really does. I mean, good Lord.
Yeah, 100%. Like it's really easy to like just shit on the Italian military, and I think it's warranted for sure. I'm saying this as a Greek American, right? So like, trust me, I'm all for it. All for it. Lay it on. But but you got to give respect where it's due. Like the individual Italian soldier. I mean, they were led into like a fiasco, and it's just sad. It's like just meat grinder type stuff. And for what?
It really was.
It
really was.
So let's start with something else. Planning, pretty basic thing when doing a war. Planning, right? Plan for your day, your week. So
I mean,
Mussolini.
yeah. No, go
No,
ahead, and we'll go through every
yeah,
failure.
yeah. So Mussolini had given only 2 weeks for the chief of the general staff, Badoglio, to plan for the entire invasion. And originally, Badoglio had requested 20 divisions for the initial push into Greece, which, as we know, they get like half-ish of that, less than half. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, so like that's stupid. A big part of this had to do with the fact that Mussolini was using around 600,000 troops in order to help with the harvest. So it was like fall time. They need harvest. And, like getting soldiers to do that kind of work is an easy way to pay them garbage wages, if at all, and get a job of national importance done, you know? So you got that right there.
Which is just absolutely crazy that you're using your soldiers to do your agrarian jobs and whatever,
Yeah.
Again, fascism. If you're going to be a fascist, the
Be good at it at
organization's
least.
kind of top of the chart.
Yeah.
Yeah, be at
Yeah.
least good at it. Obviously, this is a Mussolini issue. That's exactly. I
Yeah.
can yell about this all day. We're not gonna.
Yeah. Another thing too was like just like you're saying, Mussolini issue, right? He was known for changing his mind over a dozen times in a single day, often just agreeing with whoever spoke to him last. One morning, Yugoslavia was the target, not Greece. Then after lunch, it was Greece that had to be punished. And by supper time, Yugoslavia and Greece both had to be invaded. The day after that, neither. And that same afternoon, Greece again, and so on and on and on and on and on. Right?
And that's important. I really want to stress this. The only reason that these invasions were even happening is because he was throwing a jealous fit that Hitler and the
Yes.
Germans
Yes.
had taken France. And
Yes.
he
Yes.
realized that Italy would always be relegated to a secondary role in the Axis powers. He was literally throwing a teenage girl's fit. Like,
Exactly.
well, Hitler got France. What do I get? And instead of taking something of strategic importance, like, say, Egypt, and really thinking out an
Right.
invasion, he literally threw a girl fit and said, well, my people just traditionally have shit going on with, I don't know, Greece. Why
Yeah.
not today? It
Spazio
is
Vitali.
crazy.
Yeah.
Right?
It,
We
yeah.
used to do this back in ancient times. I want Greece today.
Right.
It's crazy.
And I forgot, I mean, but to your exactly like you're saying, I forgot if I had mentioned it in like earlier episodes, but that is it in a nutshell, right? Like I think he said, I want Hitler to hear that I took over Greece in the newspapers. Because Badoglio Ciano, one of the guys, was like, shouldn't we call Hitler? And he's like, no, don't tell him. I want it to be a surprise.
Yes.
Speaking of
Yeah.
Hitler,
He
after
literally wanted to deliver it as a gift.
yeah. Cuckoo. So, speaking of Hitler, after a meeting with Mussolini in March of 1940, Hitler had described Mussolini as, quote, a schoolboy who had not done his homework, which is a good one. Another Italian general, Quirino Armellini, cited in his diary the absolute and, quote, disorder, lack of preparation, and muddle in every sphere, end quote. And that, and quote, someone will say, 15 days from now, we must be ready to march against Yugoslavia, or in 8 days, we will attack Greece from Albania, as easily as saying, let's have a cup of coffee. The Duce hasn't the least idea of the differences between preparing for war on flat terrain or in mountains in summer or in winter. Still less does he worry about the fact that we lack weapons, ammunition, equipment, animals, raw material. So, yeah.
He lacked the sense of the Romans and the organization of the Romans,
Right,
for
exactly.
sure. I
Everything that
mean,
made the
we're
Romans
talking about
successful.
he lacked, and we're talking about basic military understanding of what you need, supply chains, to how to set up a camp. I mean, it was incredible. It was truly incredible.
Yeah.
And then
And
again, the landscape. no idea what they were walking into.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't know how you do that, but if you're that stupid and you're Mussolini, you do that quite regularly, apparently. It's like everyday thing for you. So
all the time. Constantly.
All the time. You're El Duce, you can do that. It's okay. So another byproduct of Mussolini, and I mean, you know this because, you're a historian, you've read a lot of history, and, if you read a lot of history and you just look at any authoritarian regime, this is always a byproduct. It's a necessity of it. But anyways, what I'm getting at is that Mussolini and any dictator or garbage leader, I should say, have what's called like an echo chamber, right? That's like what they're surrounded around.
Oh, yeah.
Which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a situation or environment where perhaps even like a culture or expectation that's created when your subordinates operate in, that results with them agreeing to whatever bullshit you churn out, creating a feedback loop. So when Mussolini says or believes something as ridiculous as, let's say, the Greek army will surrender en masse when the Italians cross the border and hail the Italians as liberators from the hated Metaxas, and yes, this was an actual assumption that was baked into Italian military planning, I shit you not, then Mussolini will hear his yes men all around him saying, yes, absolutely, Duce. It's so ridiculous, huh?
I, in my head, always call it the Macbeth madness.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know Macbeth.
Oh, we've reached the case of the Macbeth madness, where everybody's just at that point where the real insanity has kicked in, and that's it. We're the echo chamber, the yes men, where that point in which the dictator views himself as the great liberator. That always comes. It's always that, right?
That's it, 100%. And like no one will disagree. The leader hears his own echo in a chamber made for himself, an echo chamber. And perhaps most importantly, participating in an echo chamber is a way to get ahead if you're like a minion, right? Like it's loyalty that gets you ahead. It's not like anything else that gets you ahead.
Please see all of Russian history.
Yeah, I know. It's really sad. Yeah. It's gotta be, it's just so bad. And like, that's the one thing, and like another thing too is like, I'm pretty sure it happens. Badoglio comes out and criticizes Mussolini at some point later on. And Mussolini like gets the press on him, and Badoglio ends up resigning as a result. But he gets the last laugh because, if I'm not mistaken, he takes over after Mussolini starts, hanging like a bat upside down. So yeah,
it's one way to put it.
Yeah, right.
That's a nice way to put that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, for a man for like Mussolini, fascist, I think that's the best resting pose.
Yeah,
is that
I do too.
It's very natural.
I do too.
Arms very are natural. Just kind of hanging there. It's nice. So, anyways, and another thing too, you can't forget is like in this environment, you have all these men, ambitious men, generals, whatever, competing for all the same goal, whatever that may be for each of them. So, like you got characters like Praska, Mussolini, who often believe their own baloney at the end, and again like Badoglio, who I talked about, who ends up getting canned at the end for and being forced to resign for like voicing his actual opinion that like this is fucking stupid, and I told you guys that we need more time, we need more divisions, we need more planning, and no one listened to me.
Yeah.
So let's get back to the one thing, right? Which is kind of funny. This belief that the Greek military would surrender en masse. There was very real conviction within the military planning circles in Rome. And this had to do with their belief that everyone hated Metaxas. Now, not entirely incorrect. Metaxas was indeed not the most popular guy. And although we didn't mention it in any of our previous episodes, Metaxas even had a Venizelist uprising in Chania, Crete in 1938, just to highlight how unpopular he was in some large swaths of society. It was tiny, mostly insignificant and fizzled out almost immediately thanks to infiltration by a secret police, that's Faglia. But it was an attempt to oust him nonetheless. And yeah, he was an oppressive dictator with quasi-semi-fascist elements, and while by no means was he nearly as murderous, racist, or genocidal as Mussolini or Hitler or expansionist, he was a dictator. People generally don't like being ruled by an iron fist. Right.
But he's our dictator. The devil
Right.
And
It's
in a
better than the one you
time of
don't.
right, in a time of nationalism, which is why we're in a world war,
Right.
it's very important to the Greeks that if you're going to have a dictator and nationalism is running amok,
Right. He's our
he
guy.
needs to be a Greek dictator,
Right.
not
Really
an
Greek.
Italian one.
And you
So
know what
it's really... Go
And
ahead.
you know what really? Yeah. And you know what Greeks really don't like, Jess?
Tell me.
Mussolini. So once Mussolini demanded, Greece capitulate, Mussolini inadvertently made Metaxas the cat's meow. All of a sudden, everyone did love Metaxas, right? And even to this
Yeah.
day, you ask Greeks today about Metaxas, people will be people who understand will be you ask I don't know, a generation like my dad who was born in the 40s, and people, that kind of people, and they grew up in the village and the mountains and stuff. They'll be like, oh, he was a dictator, but he beat the Italians, right? It's always but he beat the Italians, so fucking great, it's awesome,
The devil, there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, back to the surrendering and massing, this part's kind of funny. There was this big secret operation to bribe Greek colonels and generals with millions of Italian lira and Greek currency, drachmi, in order to allow the Italians to pass through certain key valleys and passes unopposed. But there is no actual proof that any of the money given to these Italian spies or saboteurs ever got to the Greek colonels or generals or whoever they were supposed to go to, meaning that the money either never got through in the first place, or the Greek military colonels and generals or whoever just took a nice big bag of money and they're like, thanks, bro. And then they're like, fuck you. You know what I mean?
That is my favorite part of this story. One, I'm going to assume it never got there. And if it did, why in the world would you think that would make any kind of a difference at all? Again,
right.
Oh,
because
it's just
totalitarian regimes...
weird that an Italian doesn't get how any kind of mob deal works, but that's okay, man.
Exactly. And totalitarian regimes are notoriously, or not notoriously, but are well known for being very transparent and not corrupt, right?
Oh yes.
So that was going to be the money was going to get there, everything was going to go smoothly there.
Yep.
Another really large part of Italian military strategy rested on the emergence of an independent state called Chaemuria in the Greek Epirus region, coinciding with the invasion. And this because European history a lot, but Greece, just like most Balkan and other European countries before World War II, was much more heterogeneous than homogenous, right? Had several ethnic minorities in its borders. Chaemuria comes from the word cham, which were Albanophone people. Albanophone meaning, speaking Albanian speaking. They were Muslim in religion, and they lived in the Greek region of Epirus on the border with Albania. Let's unpack that a little bit. We're going to run into the Chams later during the Civil War, unfortunately, tragically and stuff. It's not going to be good, but we're going to run into them again, so I don't want to get into it too much. Let's talk about their actual ethnicity a little bit. As with many things in the Balkans, it's complicated. According to a League of Nations mixed commission way back in 1924, when the population exchanges between Greece and Turkey were taking place, most Chams declared their origin as Turkish and wished to be included in the exchange, while a fewer amount declared their origin as Albanian. Either way, whether they were Albanians originally or Turks or even Greeks who converted to Islam and picked up Albanian as their primary language, their defining cultural traits were religion, Islam, language, Albanian. Um, around this time, there are probably around like 25,000 Chams living in Epirus. When Mussolini came into power, a propaganda and diplomatic blitz was enacted to help try to foster a new Cham identity closely tied with Albania. Um, so yeah, the Italians figured that upon gloriously driving into Epirus, remember unopposed because all the Greeks they encounter will surrender, the Cham Albanians will then rise up and carve out their own statelet and perhaps even link up with Albania, creating a greater Albania, right? Because like I don't know if you're familiar, but the Epirus region is still like contested in Greece, right? Northern
Yes.
Epirus, Southern Epirus, yada yada. You know, um,
Yes.
and like all of this makes sense when we remember that Albania and Albanian interests had always been used as like a tool by Italy as a way to project and penetrate Italian power and influence into the Balkans, kind of like a land bridge, if you will. And we saw this going all the way back to the Tellini incident and the invasion of Corfu in 1923, as we talked about in earlier episodes. Lastly, and I really believe this is tied with Mussolini being an absolute fucking moron as the number one reason for the Italian defeat, is that sorry, I don't know how else to put it, is that the Greeks were simply underestimated across the board. And this is kind of the culmination of all the other reasons we just talked about. They would surrender en masse, they didn't want to fight, yada yada. And the Greeks ended up not having great morale, not amazing morale, but fanatical morale. Fanatical. And like Napoleon said, morale outweighs all other factors to a ratio of 3-1. I think that's like the famous thing, right? Napoleon says. The other thing too is the Greeks have been on the receiving end of Mussolini's bullying for like decades at this point. And the Greeks have a long history of, resisting. At this point, going to war. This is probably their I don't know, Macedonian struggle, Balkan Wars 1, 2, World War 1, Greco-Turkish War, and now this, right? So, for
Right.
them, this was just another instance to defend Greece, and the revolution's motto of freedom or death really was resurrected on October 28th. And the Greeks fought with bullets, bayonets, rocks, and even with their own teeth when nothing else was available. And not exaggerating by that, this is an amazing report by journalist C.L. Sulzberger, the New York Times at the time. He reported and he said, and quote, rickety trucks bounced to the front over impossible roads, bearing Hellenic fishermen and farmers. They rode to death and glory with garlands over their ears and their rifle muzzles stuffed with flowers, shouting, on to Rome. Antiquated mountain artillery was trudged alongside combs to shell the fascists in the valleys. Evzone Greek guard patrols attacked with their knives and teeth, butting the scared little Italian infantrymen. I visited a forward prisoner's cage that included dozens of frightened fascists with tooth wounds in their shabbily bandaged necks. End quote.
Yes, that's largely what I meant too when I was comparing this to Gallipoli. I meant it was that rough. I mean, beating people
Oh,
to
wow.
death with rocks and whatever was to hand. You didn't want any. They meant it. Like if you were, you know what I'm saying, you're not coming up this hill. You're not
Yeah.
taking Greece. You're not getting in. Down to bite marks. It was
Right.
absolutely bloody, nasty, hand-to-hand combat. Cannot be overstated just how, viciously horrific too this combat, like, how horrible the war actually was.
Yeah.
Because again, we're not
Absolutely.
working with the best of equipment. And this is up close, hand-to-hand combat. I just want to paint the picture for your listeners. And I'm glad that you did too with that little quote.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, you're 100% right. It was brutal. I mean, fighting in the mountains of Albania is brutal. Fighting any war is hell as it is, right? But just the topography, to deal with, it was a brutal war and it was really existential, you know. So yeah. And as far as the Greeks were concerned, their nation's pride was at stake. And this was their time once again to kind of rise to the occasion. Those are the intangibles of trying to understand why the Italians flopped so hard. Some more tangibles include the fact that contrary, and I don't want to say that this narrative is incorrect, outnumbered and outgunned. For the most part, Greece was right. They had like 4 tanks, I don't know, a dozen airplanes. They were very much outnumbered and outgunned. There were some cases though where Greek equipment was superior to the Italians. Yes, like they had mules and all that stuff, but like the machine guns like the Czechoslovak Hotchkiss and 75 millimeter and 105 millimeter mountain cannons were indeed much superior to their Italian competition. And even more importantly, the weapons were not just for show, right? Like the Greeks had become quite proficient in their use, which we saw time and time again in Greece, and then when they got into southern Albania. And that, you really owe it to Metaxas' rearmament program for all that. So yeah, for all those reasons and more,
again,
the
perfectly
Greco-Italian
stated. That, and we should just always remember, people have been coming for the Greeks for thousands of years. It's not their first rodeo.
Yep, it's true.
If you want it, come and claim it. It's not their first go round.
As they say, and I hate to say this because it's been co-opted by literally fucking Nazis in America, unfortunately. But you have the ancient Greek phrase "molon lave," right? Come and take it. It's traditional.
Yeah.
Sad. It's been co-opted by like the worst people ever. But
I'm shocked they could learn the Greek.
Me too. Me too. I'm sure they mispronounce it though, but that's okay.
Oh, I'm certain.
Molon
if they come for Latin,
Yeah. Right. As we know, by March 1st, reports arrived of German troops crossing the Danube River into Bulgaria. But still, Korizis, the new prime minister, just like Metaxas before him, held out for hope and tried his best not to provoke the Germans into invading by taking precautions like pressuring the British to limit their air force operations south of Macedonia and to focus on the Albanian front. But, even so, spies and reconnaissance weren't needed to see that the British and New Zealander and Australian troops and supplies had disembarked in the port city of Pirea in early March in broad daylight. So it wasn't like the best job at hiding it. Allied troops and airplanes or not, though, none of that would matter because Hitler had already come to a decision 2.5 months earlier in December of 1940, probably because he lost all hope of the Italians being able to handle themselves. After all, by March, we're going on like 5 straight months of the Greeks, with some British naval and air support mopping the floor with the Italians. Also by December, there would have already been reports getting through to Hitler that there were, as a matter of fact, British pilots delivering some punishing defeats to the Italian Air Force, and that British air and naval support had provided some limited help to the Greeks since the early days of Mussolini's invasion. And I mean, I'm sure you know already about a lot of this stuff. Like, you mentioned it earlier about why Mussolini went in, right, to Greece. One, I want to be the big guy. I want to prove to Hitler that I'm also, a real big-time player, whatever, yada, yada, yada. But a big reason why Hitler had to intervene in the Balkans, well, there's a couple reasons. But for starters, Hitler already had in the works Operation Barbarossa, right? So, that was in the pipeline. And if all goes according to schedule, that would take place soon. And British air bombers stationed in Greece would be in range of the important Plosi oil fields in Romania, obviously a pivotal resource, especially when invading the Soviet Union, right?
Correct. Because what we have to understand about the Second World War, especially for the Axis powers, is mechanization's not the problem. Resources are. They're, it's kind of a power grab. It's going to be a resource grab for the Japanese and for the Germans alike. So they've got all these massive machines of war. They're 20 years ahead of everybody else in the world. But you need oil, you need rubber, you need all of these things. So you can't have the British knocking on the back door of, what are huge oil reserves when you're going to turn around, and try to backstab
Right, exactly. Yeah, literally backstab. Yeah.
Maybe the Soviets, when you're planning all kinds of treachery all over the globe, you're really going to need access to all the natural resources you can find. And you don't need the British with a nice foothold down there in Greece, right near the Balkans, specifically Romania.
Right.
And also, just them being in Greece gives them a good launching point for that delicious, delicious British Navy of theirs to just be floating around free and unhindered and have a great spot to sneak in the back door of Europe, as it were. So it's imperative that Germany does not have the British playing around free and loose in Greece.
Yeah.
And just as Mussolini's getting his ass handed to him, and it's just an easy, fun game for the RAF and for the British and for the British Navy down there, this is a huge problem for Hitler. So not only is this a resource game, but also we're talking about the ports would be invaluable. This is a great thing for the British, and it's a huge problem for the Germans.
Right. Because you can't rely on the Italian Navy. They've already got their ass handed to them, I think, like twice. Once at Cape Matapan. Yeah. Another Toronto, I believe.
Oh, yeah. It's a big problem.
Yeah. Another big thing, additionally, another reason or whatever why, Greece had to be taken care of is taking over the rest of the Balkans all the way down to Crete would allow the Germans to threaten British positions in Egypt and Libya. Kind of like reinforcing that flank,
Which, again, why the Germans would have preferred that the Italians take British Egypt. Not only that, but that gives you the Suez, which would have been a much smarter thing to have done, because who doesn't want that? But the British definitely don't need that, whereas Greece is just going to be like, that really shores up a lot of positions for the British and for the Allies. It's a huge win for them.
Right, 100%. 100%. Yeah. So, I mean, that southern flank, that had to be checked, nonetheless. So, as the Germans streamed into Bulgaria, a British Lieutenant General John Dill, who was in Greece at the time trying to help with organizing the defense, asked Papagos, who was the commander-in-chief of all Greek forces, to start to prepare for the inevitable. But Papagos was adamant about not pulling out of Albania, most likely out of pride. That's all I could really been able to gather anyways. If someone else has a better answer, please let us know. And, you have to think of the context of it. The Greek positions in Albania were holding on to specifically the Greek region of northern Epirus, which had already tried to break away and become either its own independent state or unite with Greece twice at this point. I think 1914, another time in 1918. And I think they'll... Anyways, so northern Epirus, again, to this day, it's very controversial and stuff like that, and there's a Greek minority there. It had always been sought after by Greece. Again, has a significant Greek population, yada, yada. All that aside, though, you think of the sacrifices that had been made, on those mountains, valleys, forges, and rivers. So, Papagos didn't want to pull out. As we'll see, though, this decision made out of hubris or short-sightedness or whatever will come to bite him in the ass later. And to be fair to Papagos, he had been in correspondence with the Yugoslavs for a bit now, and there was actually a planned operation to take place as soon as possible in order to push the Italians out of the Balkans once and for all. Doesn't happen. Spoiler alert. So, the Yugoslavs, the plan would have been for the Yugoslavs to push from the east, the Greeks from the south, and ideally the whole gig is done before the Germans invade. And after the Italians were finished off, then they would both turned their attention hand in hand to face the German threat. Papadimitriou at the time had really placed a lot of faith in the Yugoslav army of around 800,000 as being the real difference maker. Big number, huh?
Yeah.
800,000. But, it's just a big number. And it's just like a number on a piece of paper. You can say like, wow, wow, we wow. But like, this, I know this, some of our listeners might know this, that like the Yugoslavs were also ready to fight each other as much as they were the Germans or the Italians or anyone else.
Right.
Like the Serbs, will fight the Germans, but the Slovenes, the Croatians, we already know what the Croatians are going to do, unfortunately. They're going to, have their own state. They're going to create, Jasanovic will be one of Europe's largest and deadliest concentration camps. So, yeah.
This area is a mess, guys. Again, everybody in the Balkans, Yugoslavia, they are just as likely to fight each other as anybody else. It cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
The partitioning of what used to be the Ottoman Empire caused a lot of problems, but you guys already know this.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet.
Empires falling apart tend to do that. So I've heard. Yeah.
Especially when partitioned by the British.
Yeah, right? Yeah. For sure.
Ask the Middle East how that goes.
Yeah. No bueno. But that's it for today, everyone. Please join us next time as we witness the last successful blitzkrieg in Europe, the shattering of the heroic Yugoslav resistance, and the one thing that can always be counted on, the never-ending humiliation of Mussolini and Italians. Take care. Bye-bye.